Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Asia Society. I'm Tom Nagorski. I'm the Executive Vice President here. Delighted to have you all here bright and early during what has been a very busy week. Even on the standards of the UN General Assembly sessions, for us, it's always busy. It's been particularly so this year, or at least it seems. Particular welcome, by the way, to those who have joined us from multiple events, and I have already seen some faces who were here till late last night with the Minister for Foreign Affairs from Singapore, so we should probably give you some special membership privileges for that. We thank you. And in the midst of this already action-packed week, what a very special guest and what an honor and privilege we have to present our special guest this morning, architect of probably one of the most interesting political revivals. I think Kevin Rudd just said, if I'm not mistaken, patron saint of political return. It's not my line, it's Kevin Rudd's. And really one of the most interesting stories, if not around the world, certainly in the region this year. The Prime Minister of Malaysia, His Excellency Dr. Mahathir Mohamad, is with us. With that applause, I'm going to be very brief in my notes about coming events at the Asia Society, but indulge me just for a moment. We do have one more leader from the region coming to see us. That's tomorrow at the lunch hour. We will have the foreign minister, newly appointed foreign minister in the new government from Pakistan, will be here in conversation with Vali Nasser, Dean of the School of Advanced International Studies at Johns Hopkins. On Monday night, now those of you who were here last night will have heard the minister from Singapore speak. Actually, it was his opening set of remarks about the digital revolution in Asia. That's what he chose to focus on. A lot of discussions about artificial intelligence, the data barons of the world. And on Monday night, I want to mention that Kai-Fu Lee, who, if you don't know the name, you will soon. He's probably one of the smartest leading minds on those subjects, artificial intelligence, and particularly the impact in Asia. He is author of the recently released book, AI, as in Artificial Intelligence, Superpowers, China, Silicon Valley, and the New World Order. That's Monday night. And a special note about the 9th of October, a week from Tuesday, very special day for us. It's the day when we honor the 2018 Asia Game Changers. These are a group of individuals, a small group who are having remarkable transformative impact across Asia and the world. We have a gala celebration for them downtown at the Cipriani Broadway space, but also here in the auditorium that afternoon at 1:30, I believe. We will have a group of those game changers on our stage for sort of more informal conversations, including Indra Nooyi, the CEO, until I think next Tuesday or Wednesday of PepsiCo. She will be our chief honoree, and she'll be here in conversation about leadership that afternoon along with the other game changers. And I'm particularly delighted, completely different, of course, to share that we've just confirmed a group of people who were really intimately involved in that incredible story this summer in Thailand in those caves and that miraculous rescue. The Thai official who led the rescue effort will be with us. The coach of that boys' soccer team who helped them survive, really, in the caves, and one of the boys themselves. They'll all be here. That's on the afternoon of the 9th of October. So, to our special guest this morning. It's one of those needs no introduction, but you want to do an introduction. Dr. Mahathir Mohamad, chair now of the Pakatan Harapan Coalition, served, of course, previously as Prime Minister of Malaysia from 1981 to 2003, and that already made him the longest-serving Prime Minister in his nation's history. Was a dominant figure in the region, architect also of great economic growth for that period. But when you look at the span of years and time, it's fascinating to note that his political career really began more than 70 years ago when he helped form the United Malays National Organization, UMNO, in 1946. Mahathir Mohamad was first a medical doctor, first entered Parliament in 1964, and then just fast forward a little more than a half century, and in the first week of this year, he was announced as the Pakatan Harapan Coalition candidate for Prime Minister. And that party won a resounding victory. He was sworn in on May 10th of this year, and I hope Prime Minister, I'm not embarrassing you to say he has since celebrated his 93rd birthday. Prime Minister will give some brief remarks here on our stage, be joined then for a conversation with our Policy Institute President, Kevin Rudd, former Prime Minister, of course, and Foreign Minister of Australia. We will leave some time for questions before we adjourn. And I do want to make special mention, I've said so at all the events this week, our programs here during UN General Assembly Week are made possible by the support and funds of the Nicholas and Sheila Platt Endowment. Delighted to recognize this morning our former President, Ambassador Nicholas Platt, who's with us. And lastly, reminders, we are on the record. This is being webcast, as have our other programs. If you have questions from beyond the room, please use the hashtag on Twitter, Asia Society Live, to send your questions, or you can email them to moderator@asiasociety.org. That's enough from me. A warm welcome again now, please, for His Excellency, the Prime Minister of Malaysia, Dr. Mahathir Mohamad.
Good morning to everyone. Firstly, I would like to say thank you to Asia Society for this invitation to talk about Malaysia, the new Malaysia. Malaysia is not always new, it's been quite old in terms of a newly independent country. We have never experienced any change. We love the party which won us the independence so much that we keep on re-electing that party. Incidentally, I was the president of that party for 22 years. But I decided that 22 years was long enough. I resigned. Although I have been known as a dictator, but I don't think many dictators have resigned. The more strange thing is that having been criticized by the opposition for 61 years, or for a long time, over 50 years, they decided that they should choose me as their leader. It is really a contradiction. They used to call me a dictator, a very unjust leader, and all kinds of other names. But after I resigned, they had no difficulty accepting me to lead them. And it is their decision to name me as the prospective leader and Prime Minister of Malaysia. Actually, we never thought we were going to win. We thought we were going to lose. So we prepared a very long manifesto because we think the manifesto would embarrass the government, which we thought would be the BN government. But we now find it embarrassing because we have to fulfill all the nasty things that we put into the manifesto. Still, we are managing. And when we won, we thought there would be problems. There would have been problems if we had won by a small majority. But we won by a very big majority, not a two-thirds majority, but a very big majority, which I think caught the previous government and they were hardly able to react to this situation. There were many delays in announcing the opposition's scores, but eventually they had to accept that their opposition had won, and they gave in rather nicely without any attempt to frustrate us. There were some things happening in the background. They were trying to form some kind of coalition with a few other parties, including the Islamic Party, with the idea that they could achieve a majority and set up an Islamic government. But I think in that they failed because Malaysians are very pragmatic and they don't like to have some radical changes taking place in the country. And so we formed the new government. We call ourselves Pakatan Harapan. It is a coalition of hope. And now we are the government, and the first thing we have to do, of course, is to solve some of the problems created by the previous government. Mainly it is the financial situation. The previous government borrowed huge sums of money, some of which was used for proposed railway lines, high-speed rail, etc. But we realized that we would not be able to pay the debt. And the agreements that were made with foreign contractors was unfavorable for Malaysia. So because of that, we wanted to get out of that contract. And of course, that's not easy. Contracts can be terminated if both sides agree. But if one side only wants to throw out the contract, then the other side would be quite resistant. Still, we are trying, and at the moment we feel that the other side, the contractor's side, and the country where they come from, China, are not too happy, but also not objecting too strongly. On both the East Coast Railway, which would cost us 55 billion Malaysian ringgit, 4 Malaysian ringgit would be equal to $1. And also for the high-speed rail, a distance of about 200 kilometers. And a high-speed train with that short distance doesn't really save any time. So we decided that both projects were not viable, and we are negotiating to either terminate or maybe reduce the scope or postpone to a later date. We are in the process of negotiating with them. So far, there have been no absolute rejection of our proposal, so we hope we can avoid having to raise huge sums of money for these railways, which will be borrowed from the contracting company, country, and it will be a great burden on us. Also, the borrowings by the previous government amounted to well over 1 trillion Malaysian ringgit. The 1 trillion is a number that Malaysians are not familiar with. We had to explain to them that it means 1,000 billion. And we could perhaps raise a few billions, but to find 1 trillion ringgit is tough for us. We never borrowed that much before. Still, we are doing our best to reduce the amount that we have to pay, reduce the borrowings, and I think we would be able, over a short period of maybe 1 or 2 years, we will be able to reduce the borrowings to a reasonable amount which the country can service and repay the loan. But apart from that, the previous government also disrupted the administrative machinery. Of course, in our system, like in other democratic countries, the powers given to the legislative, executive, and the judiciary are separate. The executive has to take orders from the elected government, but it is limited, of course, to implementing projects and programs and the like. But what has happened now is that over the last 5 or 10 years, the administrative organization has been subverted in the sense that they are now a part of the party of the previous government. They even campaign during the elections. They wear the shirts, blue shirts of the BN party, and they were active in supporting the BN party, especially among the senior members. Of course, this is not something that we can live with. We have to change. So we spend a lot of time either removing or putting in cold storage many of those who were openly supporting the previous government, and we have to replace with new people. In the government itself, we have to choose from among the more junior members. Unfortunately, the junior members are not well versed in administration, so we have a tough time trying to carry out the administration of the country. But there are also many institutions and companies belonging to the government, which in the past were managed by party members from the BN party. But now we have decided that we should let professional people manage all these institutions and companies. That is going on quite well. We have identified people who are not committed to any party, who are mainly in business or heading some other organizations which are not committed to the previous government. We had a tough time trying to organize the campaigns against the previous government because the government has a habit of punishing anybody who donates money to the opposition. In fact, we won this opposition with less than 1/10 of what the government party spent. We learned how to be lean in terms of our campaign, and in fact, although the government has this slogan that cash is king, practically admitting to the world that bribery is okay. So we had to, they were spending huge sums of money, giving to the voters. We couldn't do that. We didn't have the money. But it seems that the voters have got strong feelings about getting rid of the government. So between with the strong feeling against the government, they, despite receiving the money, they would receive the money, but they would not vote for the government party. So cash is king is not really correct, because people can accept money, but that doesn't mean that they will be obedient to the cash. It's quite obvious that despite the millions spent on the electorate and on party leaders, they perform very badly. So because of the feelings of the voters, we won. Of course, we were fortunate in being able to bring together 4 opposition parties into a coalition, and at the very last minute, our party was declared as illegal, which means that we couldn't contest, and then we couldn't form the coalition. The coalition also was made illegal, But that was okay. We decided we'll use one flag, one logo, one symbol of one of the parties in the coalition. And effectively, we contested the election as a coalition against the government coalition. So it was almost a two-party contest. And because of the strength or the support that we had from the people for the opposition parties, we won the election. So now it is a problem of overcoming some of the wrongdoings of the previous government. We have decided to go back to democracy, to the rule of law, and to all those things that are associated with democracy. This was not... Yeah, we have always claimed ourselves to be democratic before, because some people do not think we were democratic before. But I would like to claim that when I was leading the country, we were democratic. My argument, of course, is that if I'm a dictator, I wouldn't have resigned. So we are now going back to democracy, to the rule of law. And of course, the rule of law is very tedious, very time-consuming. We have to take action against the previous government and its leader, the Prime Minister. But to do that, we have to abide by the needs of providing proper evidence in a court of law. So it has been quite some time before he was actually charged in court. But we want to adhere to the rule of law, even if it is an inconvenience and even if the result may not be what we want. But I'm pretty sure that we have enough evidence for the courts to accept our charge, the government's charge that the previous government was not only undemocratic, but it was guilty of corruption, and it was also guilty of stealing government money, not small amounts. We like to be famous, of course. We like to be well known in the world. But today we are well known for the biggest money laundering effort ever made by any nation anyway. So that will go down in history also. But trying to get back the money is a big problem for us. We are slowly confiscating whatever we could. The latest one, we confiscated a yacht, which is 300 feet long, or 100 meters long, very big yacht, and it's now in Malaysia. Of course, it is claimed by Jolo that it is his yacht. That is fine, he can claim. He can come back to Malaysia and make his claim. Of course, we have also a claim on him. He comes back to Malaysia, he will be arrested. So at the moment, he is somewhere around in the world. I believe he has quite a number of passports. So he can still move around and maybe live in countries where there are no extradition rights with Malaysia. But I would like to say that we have great hopes for the country to be resuscitated. And we want, as always, to be business-friendly. We are keen to invite foreigners to come and invest in Malaysia. Of course, Malaysians too invest in Malaysia, although for some time now they have been investing abroad. But we want them to invest in Malaysia, and foreign investors are welcome to invest in Malaysia. We know a few things about developing the economy, and I think we'll apply our knowledge to help the country recover economically and also politically. Politically, now the people recognize that this government is not corrupt. So far, there has been no reports, or well, not true. Two of the members of the government party, not prominent leaders, were caught receiving bribes, and they have been charged in court. But otherwise, the corruption level is very, very low. We do not hear much about corruption now in Malaysia. The government machinery is moving quite smoothly. We will re-adopt the concept of Malaysia Incorporated, which means that Malaysia is a corporation in which the private sector and the government work closely together to ensure that the corporation succeeds and delivers to the people. So these are the things that we are doing, and if there are any questions, I would be happy to answer. Thank you.
Well, Prime Minister, thank you for that bravura performance. I've been here at the Asia Society for some time now, and very few occasions have I seen a head of government or a head of state stand and deliver a 30-minute speech without a single note. It's quite remarkable. As Tom Nagorski said before, in many parts of the world, we regard you as the patron saint of political comeback. It's a remarkable achievement, your campaign. Those of us in the region watched it very closely. But as you said, it requires a lot of hard work. Your stamina is quite extraordinary. I mean, as Tom said, you're 93. Many of us stand in awe of that. What's your secret to such health? I think everyone wants to know the answer to that question, right?
Well, I get this question asked practically anywhere I go or speak. People just wonder, I myself wonder why, because I don't really know. I've been fortunate in that I did not suffer from diseases that are incurable.
Yeah.
I've had 2 heart operations, but beyond that, I'm quite well. I have occasional cough, but I have my doctor following me everywhere I go. But reasonably moderate lifestyle. I don't eat very much. I don't eat until I grow fat. And I don't drink, I don't smoke. I do a little bit of exercise. But I believe that a person must be active.
Yeah.
If a person after retirement decides to just rest, his body will refuse to perform. You become very weak. Even if you don't think, don't solve problems, you don't read, that also affects your brain.
So keep active, keep mobile, keep problem solving, and we're going to get the name and contact telephone number of your doctor. It'll be good publicity for him or her. Well, welcome again to the Asia Society. We did some checking before. You were last here in 2003, which was near the end of your first term as Prime Minister. And we, the Asia Society, regard you as a friend, and that you have been such a distinguished leader of your country for so long, and now you've returned to the task. I listened carefully, PM, to what you said before about the challenges you now face. As you said, pre-election commitments can be difficult when you have to implement them all. But I listened particularly to what you said about rebuilding the independence of the civil service. Perhaps you could reflect on that a little further. My own judgment is that a professional, independent public service or civil service is so fundamental to the success of any of our democracies. And so perhaps you could reflect further on your plans to rebuild the independence of the civil service.
Yeah. Well, we were a colony before. And fortunately...
So are we.
Fortunately, the British...
But we were a jail as well, so it's different.
Well, you beat my record. Anyway, the British left a reasonable number of people who are familiar with administration.
Yeah.
And we took over after independence quite easily. And we followed the same practice that is found in the UK. That is that the civil service should take orders from the elected government, but only with regard to the administration of the country. But what happened, of course, under the previous Prime Minister is that the civil service became totally subservient to the elected government. They were prepared to even commit crimes, obvious crimes, because they were ordered to. And this, of course, was not good for the country. For example, the reports made against Najib was put in under Official Secrets Act, which means that the public cannot read even the Public Accounts Committee's report. And this is wrong because those reports constitute evidence, and hiding evidence is criminal. And yet, the AG was prepared to hide under this Official Secrets Act. So we find that we could no longer trust the administration. Now the process of trying to recover is very tricky because we need people with experience, but the people with experience were the culprits. So we need to have, not all though. Our ambassador here is okay. But very many of them.
Ambassador, you're safe.
Yeah, but I think it's fairly easy for them to go back to the old pattern of being administrators who will take orders from the elected government, but those orders would be limited to administrative matters, not to carry out something that is illegal.
I agree with you, PM. I mean, the British got many things wrong over the years, but Whitehall and the professionalism of the civil service has been one of their great strengths when we've sought to replicate it in our respective countries. I'm still stunned by your description of the slogan of UMNO, cash is king. That's some slogan.
Yeah.
It obviously didn't work.
It didn't work.
But the campaign that you fought, I was again struck by the fact that you had very little money and therefore campaigning against a well-funded political organisation like UMNO. And so just tell me, how much did you use social media in your campaign?
Well, we have to resort to social media because the main newspapers and the TV station are controlled by the government. They would not report anything good about us. Of course, if there is anything bad, they would report over and over again. But the social media allows us to connect with the people and tell them and respond to whatever it is that the government says. We find out that if the government says something that is wrong, for example, they call me by a funny name.
What's that, Prime Minister?
Yeah, all Prime Ministers get called by funny names. But the social media responded very quickly and rejected that assertion. And there are many other things that were done. One particular case was when the Prime Minister said he doesn't eat rice. He eats this South. Yeah, well, you know what it is. But that is
I don't know what it is. What is it?
this green coming from South America,
Oh, I see.
which is about 25 times more costly than rice.
Ah, I see. That was the
You
nature
see,
of the attack.
When he said that, of course, the response is, well, you can afford. The people down there cannot afford even to buy rice because the price of rice has gone up.
Yeah.
So the social media help us a lot.
That's really important reflection in terms of the criticism and the praise of social media in all of our democracies. But for political parties who don't have cash as king, it's pretty fundamental to getting your message out. Prime Minister, we were talking before about beyond politics in Malaysia, some of the continuing challenges you have in internal security. Would you like to elaborate on that further?
Well, we are 60% Muslim. Fortunately for us, Muslims in Malaysia are not extreme in their views or in their practice. But we have a Muslim party, Islamic party, and they tend to resort to Islamic reasons for what they call Islamic reasons for whatever it is that they did. Even though what they did is against the teachings of Islam, they still claim that it is the Islamic thing to do. And we have to counter that. And to counter that, you have to also know your religion. You will have to tell them that, look, what they're saying is not correct because the religion or the Quran says a different thing. So we counter not by saying, oh, now is modern times, you can't practice all those things. That wouldn't go down well with the Muslims. But when we point out to the Muslim people in Malaysia that what the Muslim parties is saying is completely contradictory to what is in the Quran, then we are accepted. So we have been able to reduce the support for the Islamic Party, and they could never win to become the government at the federal level, though they may win at the state level. The other thing is, of course, Malaysians now, through the social media, gain access to teachings outside the country. So quite a few Malays, Muslim, have left the country to join ISIS, and some of them have been killed. But this is a small minority, and if we catch them before they go, we have to teach them again what actually is the teachings of Islam.
So in terms of returning fighters from Syria and from elsewhere in the Middle East, I mean, Indonesians have a challenge, you have a challenge, we have a challenge with some of our Muslim communities in Australia. And so your strategy of countering militant Islamism or violent extremism, you see this as a big priority for your government for the period ahead?
Yes, it is. There is still a law which enables us to detain these people, no charges against them, but just detaining them and trying to disabuse their beliefs. We tell them that it is not actually non-Islamic, is even against the teachings of Islam, which what they were doing. And to a certain extent, we managed to convert them back to the general beliefs of the country.
Good. Now, PM, how are relations going with the neighbours? We had the Singaporean Foreign Minister here last night. I know you've always had a colourful relationship with Singapore. Not as colourful as your relationship with Australia, but tell me, how are things going with the neighbours? I see Lee Hsien Loong has been chatting to you recently. How's it going?
Well, whether we like it or not, Singapore is just next door. It's very close to us. In fact, a big number of the people in Singapore are Malaysians, they find it, well, better to live there because their incomes are much higher than in Malaysia. But we still have issues that we need to settle. Among the issues would be the price of raw water. Way back in 1926, a long time ago, the price was fixed at 3 cents per 1,000 gallons of raw water.
The British did that.
Yeah, they insist that they should pay 3 cents. Now, 3 cents cannot buy anything at all. So, but this is the cheapest source of water. And for Singapore, of course, if they try to desalinate, it costs a lot of money.
Yeah.
So we have been trying to revise the price, but we have not been successful. There are also other issues between us which have not been settled. So we will continue to talk to them. We'll not go to war with them.
I think we're well past that in our history. So now the rest of the neighbourhood. In ASEAN, you have been a major figure in ASEAN over the years. My own view of ASEAN as an outsider has been, despite many people criticising it for being weak, it's been, in my view, a huge strength in the region in turning former adversaries into partners. It's not just Indonesia, Singapore, Malaysia, but former communist and currently communist Indochina. And it works. So give me your sense of ASEAN's future given the current challenges.
ASEAN has great potential. The population of ASEAN is about 600 million. It's about half that of China. Although they are poor, but still the numbers count. So we feel that if we can open up our countries to trade with these 600 million people, ASEAN itself will grow. We've tried to set up heavy industries, allocating to each ASEAN member one industry. However, that did not happen. Malaysia did. Malaysia and Indonesia set up fertilizer plants, which are very useful. But the other states somehow or other couldn't get on with implementing the industries that is identified for them. But still, the fact remains that trade within ASEAN, between ASEAN countries, has grown. A lot of our trade is with ASEAN countries. Although now we trade a lot with China and also the rest of the world. Malaysia is a trading nation. We trade with everybody, irrespective of their ideology or religion. We trade with them and we want to maintain friendly relations. Sometimes there can be some problems, but we believe that all problems can be resolved through negotiation, arbitration, or a court of law. So far that has worked out in the ASEAN countries. It was set up actually to avoid confrontations. Yeah. That was what happened initially. But we felt that confrontation, wars, will not benefit anybody. So ASEAN has been a very peaceful regional organization for a very long time, and it has survived. Many other regional organizations have failed or have faded away, but ASEAN has remained, and I think one of the problems now is that we changed leaders. At one time in the early days, the leaders were the same. They met Kuan Yew, myself, and Suharto. We know each other, so we can always sit down and talk as friends. But now, of course, because we want democracy, we have to change leaders. And each time we go, we meet strangers, and it takes time to work with strangers.
Democracy can be troublesome.
Yes, I've said so many times.
Good, but troublesome. You've just mentioned China as a significant economic partner, probably now the major economic partner of Malaysia. It certainly is for my country, and I think most countries in East Asia. You've recently been to Beijing. I've looked carefully at the negotiations of various contracts between the Chinese and Malaysia under the previous government. You've reviewed a number of those. A number are continuing, and some have been, as it were, shelved. So, before we get into the bilateral relationship, in Beijing you met Xi Jinping and with Li Keqiang. Give me your sense of Xi Jinping, the man that you met, as he is a man with a vision for his country.
More than any other Chinese leader since Mao Zedong, Xi Jinping has a much stronger belief in nationalism, in making China a great country. So he comes up with a lot of ideas, including the One Belt, One Road, and he is pushing China to become the great industrial country that it can be. Already they have made tremendous progress, and they are very rich because their people are very good in business, and now the world is their market, so they are able to produce almost anything that others can produce. Maybe later on even airplanes would be produced by China. And Xi Jinping is someone, nationalist to the core. He wants to build a greater China. So he sometimes it may rub off wrongly on other people, but for him, China must be a great power.
Of course, given your vast experience as a Malaysian statesman and a regional statesman, you would have met Deng Xiaoping in your earlier time as Prime Minister. Have you made any reflections or observations about the similarities or differences between Xi Jinping and Deng Xiaoping?
Well, Deng Xiaoping was leading at the time when China was very poor. He came to Malaysia. At that time, I was a deputy prime minister. He wanted to ask about how Malaysia progressed. So the prime minister asked me to have a chat with him. He asked all kinds of questions about development. At that time, China was not yet industrialized. Some of the questions I could answer. Some, like how many tons of steel do you produce? I had to confess, I didn't know.
It's a very Chinese question.
But all the time he was focused on developing China.
Yeah.
And it is he who changed completely the system to allow more capital to be used for development. But Xi Jinping is inherited a China that is almost fully developed. I mean, it is a developed country, though it is still considered to be a third world country because of the per capita income. But China has got more modern facilities like high-speed train and the like than most other developed countries. And he wants to make China a great country. So he's working on, he is far more dedicated than Deng Xiaoping.
On the bilateral relationship between Malaysia and China, would have been a big focus of your visit in Beijing. What opportunities do you see? What constraints do you see for the future?
We see a rich China as a big market. 1.4 billion people, even with a small income, would still be a big market. So we can sell things to China, huge amounts of things to China, including raw materials and the like. At the moment, we are exporting some manufactured goods to China, electronics and all that, but we also receive some of their manufactured goods in Malaysia. Generally, China provides a big market. It is also a source for cheap products. Now, of high quality. Initially, their motor vehicles were not of high quality, but now they have mastered the technology and they are producing good quality cars, and they are cheap. And a lot of things that they produce would be very cheap. And in fact, most countries would ask China to produce the products that they have invented. So in a way, China is helping to keep prices low in almost the whole world.
And of course, ASEAN has had a long discussion, sometimes disagreement, sometimes confrontation with China over the South China Sea. And this is a complex matter. The previous government of the Philippines took China to the International Court of Justice. A determination was delivered by the ICJ in favour of the Philippines. How do you see the South China Sea evolving in the context of ASEAN-China relations?
Well, it all is about the strength, the power of China. I mean, Malaysia has lived with China for maybe 2,000 years. We have been trading with them, collecting jungle products in exchange for lacquerware and the like. But they have not tried to conquer us. Of course, because the South China Sea mentions China as part of its name, China claims that it is part of China. It's all right for them to claim. We can't go to war against them because they claim. What is important to us is passage of ships, vessels through South China Sea and the Straits of Malacca. For us, the sea must be open because we trade a lot. Malaysia's trading is very big, and we need the sea. So long as they don't disturb the passage of ships, we are okay with whatever claim they may make. Because we don't agree on the basis of the claim, but what can we do? We are a small country. Malaysian states have always been very small. They have always learned how to live with big neighbors. We used to send silver flowers, gold flowers to them, and we survived.
I wonder how the Singaporeans would reflect on that with you, but we'll come back to that later on. You've also been talking in recent times about the Belt and Road Initiative, One Belt, One Road. What's your view of China's grand strategy there and how it affects Malaysia and Southeast Asia?
Yeah, before China adopted this new ideology of theirs, I have actually suggested that China build a railway line from China to the west, but building bigger trains with wider tracks. I pointed out before that when the demand for oil grew in the Far East, ships were built which were bigger and bigger until they were almost 500,000 tons. But the trains have remained the same size. The modern technology should enable bigger trains, longer trains to be built, and that will speed up movements of goods and people across Central Asia. But I didn't talk about the shipping part of it because I thought that as far as shipping is concerned, they were already building big ships, big tankers and all that. But the idea is not new to us. We have also suggested before that we should have a train that links Kunming in the south of China to Singapore. Already the line is there, but it is narrow gauge and it's not quite suitable, but still it provides good communication between China and Southeast Asia. So these are not something, new ideas. These are ideas which Xi Jinping now translate into one belt, one road. He's not only thinking about the land route, the old Silk Road, but also through the sea. And of course, China needs free passage of goods to and fro in the sea as well as on land, because China must depend on raw materials coming from outside.
There's been some reaction, including in Sri Lanka, about too much debt associated with One Belt, One Road projects, and we've followed the debate about the port in Sri Lanka. What's your own view about that? I know you've had some reflections on it in terms of the level of prospective debt which might be associated with some of the bigger Chinese infrastructure projects in Malaysia.
Yeah, in the past we developed Malaysia without borrowing too much. We know that if we borrow and we cannot pay, it puts us in a very difficult position. But the last government seems to like big projects, costing a lot of money. And they were the ones Malaysian leaders were the ones who proposed. Maybe they were urged by the Chinese, I don't know. But anyway, it was the Prime Minister who suggested the high-speed rail as well as the East Coast Rail and also LRT, MRT in Kuala Lumpur, all of which cost billions of dollars, which we could not afford. We should not go into this, but the worst thing to happen is that these projects depended almost entirely on borrowing money and borrowing large sums of money. So the fall is with the Malaysian government. Of course, the Chinese contractors, if you want to give them a job, a big job, they will take. And if you cannot pay, then you have to face the penalty for not paying. So
the asset going.
Yeah. So we think that we are negotiating now, not because of China's mistake or faults, but because of our government entered into, started a projects which we cannot afford. We should live within our means. We were able to develop Malaysia quite well before without borrowing huge sums of money.
I'll be moving to questions from the audience in a few minutes. But before I do so, we've been talking about one great power called China. We're now in the bosom of another great power. It's called the United States. How's it going with the Trump administration?
Well, we didn't feel, the opposition in those days were not quite happy that Trump received the corrupt Prime Minister of Malaysia. We thought people should at least avoid seeing him, but he met Trump and he, in his usual way, he offered to bribe Trump. He wanted to buy airplanes and all that, and even to give money to the United States. I mean, it's ridiculous. Malaysia is poor and is trying to help the United States, which is about the richest country in the world. But
cash is king.
Cash is king, yeah. That's what he thinks. By now, I think he realized that cash is not king. So that was his kind of relation. But we are, at this moment, we have not proposed any proper strategy or ways of dealing with the United States, because we are still trying to figure out what is it that the President of the United States wants. Because sometimes he changes his mind 3 times a day, and that's a bit unsettling for us.
I could take that conversation in many directions, but you mentioned before that Malaysia is a great trading nation in history and the present. And of course, we're now in the midst of an unfolding trade war between the United States and China, with some capacity to affect the global economy, given the size which that bilateral trade represents as a proportion of global GDP. Your thoughts on how this may evolve, and your broader thoughts on, let's call it, the free trade rules under the World Trade Organization?
We believe that wars are not productive, whether it be the usual arms-based wars or it is trade wars. It's not productive. In the end, both countries will have to pay a price. But unfortunately, other countries which are not involved will also have to pay a price. Of course, in the US will apply sanctions. And when it does this, even countries which had no problem with the US have to obey and not trade with the countries that has been sanctioned by the US. We hope that this will come to an end very quickly, and we will be able to regain in time after the damage caused by the trade war.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, we have some time for some questions from the audience. So if we have folks with microphones, they'll pass them along to you. Can I ask that when you ask your question, simply identify who you are, if you're from by name and organisation, and keep the question short. If it becomes a statement or a political statement, I will exercise my prerogative as chair of the meeting, deploying all the tact of Australian diplomacy and cut you off. The gentleman here in the middle, if the mic could be passed to him.
My name is Su Chuan Tan. I'm originally from Malacca, Malaysia. I now manage an investment firm in Connecticut, but most of my family is still in Malaysia. My heart's still in Malaysia. Thank you for what you're doing with Malaysia Baru. The question to you is this: in your recent speeches, you've discussed the importance of cultivating an independent press in Malaysia, free from political influence and ownership. How encouraging are you of international investors making investments in Malaysian media companies and playing an active role in their business operations and strategy?
Thanks for the question.
Yeah.
PM.
Well, we are very familiar with foreign investors coming into Malaysia. In fact, we claim to be a pioneer in that practice, because when colonies become independent, they normally do not like foreigners to come into their country. But when Malaysia became independent, we had more foreigners trading, doing business in the country and living in the country than when we were a colony. Because we welcome foreign investment, we feel that foreign investment would help grow the country. And indeed, it happened that way. Now, of course, people talk about FDI as if it is the usual thing to do. But at one time, FDI was not acceptable to nearly independent countries. But we grew because of FDI. Of course, by now, our own people are quite able to invest in industries that will supply goods and products to the whole world. So we benefited much from FDI, and we will continue with that.
On the future of the media in your country, Prime Minister? The media.
Media?
Yeah.
Oh, the media is free. But of course, freedom is not absolute. If you go around to tell we are multiracial, and if one race starts provoking the other races to the point where there might be conflicts and clashes, we will have to put a stop to that. Otherwise, we are free to report whatever they like, including criticizing the government. We have allowed that to happen because the opposition, the present opposition of the old government is still controlling some of the TV stations and the press, and they criticize us. That is okay. We can reply to their criticism.
Foreign investment in the media?
Foreign investment
His
in the
question
media.
touched on that as well.
Well, there are not many foreign investment in the media, but some Western papers do publish from Kuala Lumpur before, and if they want to, they are welcome to publish out of Kuala Lumpur or to invest in the media in Kuala Lumpur.
We could give you Rupert Murdoch. Now, it's hard to see from up here, but I like to do a mix of men and women. There's a woman here in a green dress. The light here is quite bad, so thank you.
Thank you very much. My name is Catherine Heald. I'm a patron of the Asia Society. Can you please comment on the one or more islands that were leased to China that are being built by China for mainland Chinese to live on, and I read will actually be governed by China as well, despite being Malaysian land.
I think the question is about, is it Kuantan? Forestry. There's a Chinese project where there is the building of some offshore islands just off the Malaysian coast. So the question was, how do you feel about the project, and will they be subject to full Malaysian sovereignty?
Well, we welcome foreign direct investment, including from China. But to us, foreign direct investment involves bringing in capital and technology, setting up plants in Malaysia, employing Malaysians up to the level of executives. That is to us foreign direct investment. But we do not consider buying land in Malaysia, building very big cities, and bringing in foreigners to stay in the city. That is not what we believe to be foreign direct investment, because these people, about 700,000 people are coming from other countries to live in Malaysia. Of course, every country controls immigration. We see that happening in Europe, we see that happening in America. They have put up walls against Mexico and all that. But Malaysia is just like that. We want our people to be involved in whatever is happening in the country, but that we should allow a certain number of foreigners to come and live and even eventually gain citizenship in our country. But when we talk about 700,000 and even 1.5 million people coming to live in Malaysia from other countries, I think that's not on. We don't encourage that.
Good. A further question up here. The gentleman with the glasses there. Yeah. That's him. Welcome over here.
My question relates, Steve Cardman, I'm an attorney. My question relates to the global economy. There's been some concern in recent months about the fragility of some of the emerging markets, countries such as Turkey and Argentina. You led Malaysia at the time of the last emerging market crisis, the Asian financial crisis. Do you see any parallels between that situation and what's unfolding in the emerging markets now? And do you have any lessons you could draw from that experience that would be relevant today?
Sure.
Yeah, it's about the parallels between the Asian financial crisis of '97 when you're in office, PM, and problems now that we're facing in emerging markets.
Yeah, the Asian financial crisis of 1997-98 was created by currency traders. They can actually buy and sell currencies which they don't even own and depress the value or revalue the currency. And that is that is not good for business. When you don't know the value of the currency, it's very difficult to budget for the whole year. So because of that, we had to take action to take away our currency from the market. The market cannot sell or buy our currency. If they do, we will not recognize the sale. So that's how we dealt with. And I think some small countries would not be able to do that kind of thing. The strategy we adopted, because Malaysia has got very big savings, 40% of GDP, the highest savings rate among most countries. But where countries are short of foreign exchange, they don't have enough savings. We depress their currency deliberately, they become very poor. And that's not fair. For people who want to make money out of trading, to depress the value of the currency and impoverish people, that is morally wrong. But if the market feels that a currency is now not reflecting the real value, then the market can show their feelings by not using the currency or using the currency. Then, of course, the currency will remain, reflect the valuation made by the market. But currency traders, they got nothing to do with the market. They can deliberately reduce the value or increase the value. So small countries find difficulty in dealing with this fluctuation in the value of their currency. It's far better if we don't have currency trading. Currency is not a commodity. You cannot eat it. But you want to price of coffee or sugar, it's okay. But currency should not be traded the way commodities are traded.
Let me move to this side of the room here. There is a young woman here. Thank you. If we can see the mic coming in your direction. There you go. Thank you.
Thank you so much. My name is Zijun Tan, and I'm a Malaysian student here studying in New York. My question is about how you see human rights progressing in Malaysia, especially in terms of children's rights, especially with the rise of the issue of child marriages being very present in the media these days, as well as the issue of LGBTQ rights, also with migrant labor rights. Thank you.
Well, the idea of human rights and the kind of things that constitute human rights comes out of Western countries, which have a different culture than a lot of the Eastern countries. So while we respect the rights of people, but at the same time we have also to think our own moral values. So if they are in conflict with our moral values, we cannot accept them. But we will accept the rights of people to speak as long as they don't provoke people to fight, and also the right of people to move around, to have the free press, etc. But there is nothing absolute about human rights. So you cannot do certain things, even in Western countries. If, for example, everybody comes to this hall naked, I don't think the Western people appreciate that. There are certain things that you just, you say, that thus far and no more. So we may say that more often than Western countries, but we still respect human rights.
I have a question here by email from a young guy called Aaron. He says, as part of the TPP, Trans-Pacific Partnership, Malaysia pledged significant reforms to labour legislation. That effort stopped, he says, when Trump pulled out of the TPP. Would you, Prime Minister, resume this effort to make changes to Malaysia's labour laws? That's a question we've got online.
Well, there is room for some revision in the labour laws of the country. But we don't have very many problems with labour in Malaysia. We don't have very many strikes and the like. People are not very selective in terms of working. Of course, in some countries, they don't like dirty, dangerous work. But in Malaysia, if we don't like, we import foreign labor. And we treat foreign labor like Malaysian labor. We pay them the same wages. So as far as I can see, we have had very little problem with labor. Relationship between labor and the governments of the country has always been quite good. When I was Prime Minister, of course, my best friends are the labor leaders.
Now, further question over here. I think there is a gentleman here, two from the end. That's you, sir. Yeah. You're three from the end. It was the guy next to you, but that's fine. 1, 2, 3. At least in Australia, that's 3.
Tun Mahathir, thanks for this talk. Very enjoyable so far. My name is Jason Goh from Mua Johor, over here.
Just over here.
Yeah. Jason Goh from Mua Johor. I was a bit disappointed that you decided not to become education minister. I was a bit disappointed that you decided not to be education minister. I think you had thought you would like to take up that portfolio. As a kid growing up in Muar, a very small town in Malaysia, one of the things that I think really benefited people like me was the education foundation that we got was tremendous. We had good English with an accent, but that's fine. I went to a SRJK vernacular school, science stream, and it set a lot of us up for careers outside of Malaysia, for personal reasons, professional reasons. That's all been great. I feel as if education in Malaysia is not as good as when we were in school. What are your plans to improve education in Malaysia? What are the 2, 3 steps that must be taken?
Well, we want to make use of English more often because English is a universal language. Everybody speaks English, even in countries where English is not a common language, a national language. But beyond that, what we think is that education is too much about imparting knowledge to the young people so that they can be more knowledgeable about whatever subject it is that they want to learn. But we feel that the character of the people is very important. Today, in most countries, including Malaysia, parents are not able to teach their children the right values because parents both of them would be working and don't spend quality time with their children. So be in the schools, in the primary classes, and in the kindergarten even, we need to impart, to teach children the right values. Otherwise, they will adopt the values they get from their friends, and that may not be suitable for their own future or for the society. You see, values play a very big role in the development of society. If you have good knowledge of certain things, but you make a bad use of that knowledge, for example, you may learn about nuclear power, and you decide that you should build a bomb and kill people. I mean, you should be told that killing people is wrong, is immoral, should not be done, and shouldn't be involved in that. So the value system of any single individual or society is very important. And since parents are not able to teach their children what is right and what is wrong, what is sinful and what gives you merit, etc., then the school system, the educational system, should give some stress on shaping the character of the people. It's not brainwashing. After all, when the parents teach their children, that's also a form of brainwashing. But we will have to do not what other countries, some countries do, where they teach the children to love the great leader and things like that. We are not going to do that. We are going to tell them that stealing is bad. Don't steal. Being trustworthy is good. Is that something wrong? There's nothing wrong with that. So I wanted to revise the curriculum of the educational system in Malaysia, but we had made a promise in our manifesto that the Prime Minister may not hold any other portfolio. So I have to give it to somebody else, but I am in close contact with him.
I'm not sure I'd like to be that minister. I think being a Prime Minister is a big job. Trying to run another portfolio is just almost impossible at the same time. We've got time for a couple more questions before the PM has to leave us. There's a lady 4 in from the side there. Thank you.
Hi, Tun. It's great to see you here. My name is Sharon Sandhu from Kuala Lumpur. So my question to you is, will Malaysia think about moving in a direction of allowing dual citizenship, especially knowing that a lot of Malaysians currently reside overseas for professional or personal reasons?
Well, we think that you should make up your mind. Dual citizenship means that you have no citizenship at all. You can be this or that, but in Malaysia, we want people to feel that Malaysia is their country, their only country, and they want to be. If they want to be citizens of other countries, they give up Malaysian citizenship. That is our feeling. That is generally the feeling in Malaysia. So unless, of course, you make that an election issue and people vote for multiple citizenship, then we will follow what the people want. But at this moment, if we go to the polls and tell them that we stand for multiple citizenship, I'm quite sure we'll lose.
I think that's the voice of political experience speaking there. And there is a lady in the row in front, 4 from the side, who I meant before, actually. Yeah, thank you.
Good morning, Prime Minister. I was wondering if you could speak on the Rohingya issue.
The Rohingya in the Rakhine state in Myanmar. Yeah.
Rohingya. Yeah, we feel that injustice must be something that the whole world should fight against. It is unjust to treat citizens or even non-citizens in your country unjustly. It's not right. Here you have massacres being carried out against the Rohingyas, ostensibly because they were not citizens of Myanmar. But they have been there for the past 800 years. It was the British who decided to have Burma to include all these people also in Burma. The history is that there are people who have been living there a long time. So the Burmese government should accept them. Compared to Malaysia, where we have people whose origins are from other countries. When we became independent, we accepted them as citizens of the country, and they participate in the governments of the country. Every government would have people of all races, whether they are immigrants or indigenous people, they participate fully in the governance of the country. I do not understand why the Rohingyas cannot be accepted by the Burmese as a part of the citizens of Myanmar. Of course, Myanmar or Burmese people at independence actually expel a lot of Indians because they seem to think that Myanmar is only for Myanmarese people. But the Indians also have been there a long time. They were doing all the business. But in Malaysia, most of the business is done by the Chinese. We accepted the Chinese.
Now, this will be my last question for the PM. There's a gentleman there with his hand up, about 4 in from the side. Yeah, if that could pass him the microphone.
Good morning, Tun. Welcome to New York. Thank you for saving Malaysia from kleptocracy. My name is John Pang. I am with Columbia University and the International Crisis Group. I actually had to be here. I had to move here because of the kleptocracy. Yeah, but I wanted to ask you about your first administration. This is the second Mahathir administration. The first Mahathir administration was characterized by a vision for Malaysia, but also internationally. Malaysia led the world, actually, or was a leading player in East Asian regionalism, in Afro-Asian regionalism, and in South-South sort of multilateralism. In 1997, you proposed the East Asia Economic Caucus. don't you think that at this time, with rising protectionism, a sort of crumbling kind of deep anxiety about regional multilateralism, global order, and so on, that as perhaps the elder statesman of Asia, or actually the elder statesman of the planet, you might want to bring that idea back? Would you want to bring back the East Asian multilateralism? Something in the form that you proposed back in 1997,
I think
was shot down.
We've got it.
Okay. Well, that idea about an East Asian community was because Europe is a single unit at that time. There was this European community, and in North America they have NAFTA, the community which includes the US, Canada, and Mexico. So everybody seems to be forming regional organizations to strengthen their voice in international fora. But in East Asia, the countries were basically acting individually, and our voices were not strong. In fact, when we go to the WTO, for example, Malaysia would be there alone. We cannot fight against the delegation from the US, which would send about 200 experts to these meetings. So I thought that if we come together, the East Asian countries come together, they would have a stronger voice. But of course, Mr. Baker at that time told Japan and Korea not to be involved in this East Asian project. So we couldn't do that. But later on, the president of South Korea suggested the formation of ASEAN plus 3, the Southeast Asian nation plus the 3 Northeast Asian nations. That is almost like the East Asian community. I think it is good for regions to form such communities, but we should not be exclusive. We should try and work with each other. All the regions should work with each other, because in the so-called globalized world, you can't separate yourself into distinct communities which are not in confrontation with other communities. That is not good. But for the moment, I think the idea, there's a lot of talk about globalized world, but in fact, it is not globalized. Everybody protects his own nation.
Finishing on that point, Prime Minister, the East Asian Summit now exists, and that borrowed some of your original conceptual vision. Is there something you think Malaysia, under your leadership, could do to take the East Asian Summit idea further and turn it into more of an economic and even political reality?
Well, it's going to be quite difficult, because ethnically we are quite different, people with different culture. But in 1 or 2 areas we can come together. For example, we trade using the US dollar. We could have a token, East Asian token or currency that we use purpose only for trading. It's not to be used domestically, but we settle all trade differences using this East Asian currency for trading only. That could bring us together quite well, but later on, if we begin to understand each other better, then we can go into other areas of cooperation.
So Prime Minister Tun, you've been very generous with your time this morning. When are the next Malaysian elections due?
Well, 5 years from now.
So what are your plans?
Well, I have promised that I will step down and give way to Dr. Triano.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, I think we've been presented with an extraordinary presentation from the new old new Prime Minister of Malaysia this morning. I think Dr. Mahathir Mohamad has had an extraordinary political career so far, and with a mission still to deliver for his country, and for the region for the future. Let's express our appreciation in the normal way.